Hello and welcome to another video here at AV Forums. This time we're taking you through our recommended picture settings for the Philips 49PUS6501 Ultra HD 4K LED LCD TV. Now, as always, we've calibrated this TV using our calibration equipment for the review, but these are the settings for the TV that we reviewed, the specific sample that was sent to us. We can't guarantee these settings will make your picture better, they might make it worse. However, if you want to try them out, feel free, see what you think, and see if it improves the image as far as you can tell. So, first thing we need to do is to go into the menu system. Now, you can do this through the Android menu system, but there's actually a menu, there's actually a settings button on the remote control. So just press that, and you get these options down the right hand side. At the bottom you can see there's all settings. Go into all settings and then go over to picture. Now, you've got various different picture styles. We're going to be using the ISF day and ISF night settings, and as the name suggests, we're going to be creating a day and a night setting, two separate settings, one obviously brighter than the other, predominantly for using in the room during the day when there's more ambient light in the room, and the nighttime settings for using at night. It's dimmer because it's more comfortable to look at an image with that's not as bright at nighttime, because otherwise your eye is working too hard and basically it becomes quite fatiguing. This is a Philips TV, which means it has ambilight. It's got two-sided ambilight. Very useful feature. You can use the ISF setting on ambilight to create a nice neutral bias light behind the TV. Actually very effective for nighttime watching, can make your blacks look better as well. So we do recommend using the ISF setting on the ambilight control. However, in terms of the actual picture settings, we're going to start with the nighttime settings. So we're going to color. Now, the default setting here is 50. We've moved it up to 60. When we actually measured it, it was actually undersaturated across much of the scale. So by moving up to 60, we found that the color targets for the different saturation points, 25, 50, 75, out to 100, were much more accurate. So move it up, so it is a bit oversaturated to 100%, but you're not very often looking at a 100% image. The saturation points for 75, 50, 25 were very accurate at this setting, so we'd recommend moving the color control up a bit, maybe to 60. Contrast, this is actually the backlight control. So this actually controls the brightness of the TV. Now, on most TVs, contrast is something completely different. On the Philips TVs, contrast is what most manufacturers would call their backlight control. So this is the brightness of the image. Now, this is a nighttime setting, so we're setting it for 26. That gave us an image that was nice and bright for watching in a dark room, but not so bright that it becomes fatiguing for the eyes. So use 26. Sharpness we put down to 0, and then we go into the advanced settings. First of all, color. Now, color temperature is interesting. The TV defaults to warm in the ISF mode. In actual fact, that measured very, very accurately. And when we actually did the calibration, we ended up with almost exactly the same settings for red, green, and blue that were being used for the warm setting. So it's a very accurate out-of-the-box setting, and so congratulations to Philips there. That gave measurements that were all below 3, and most of them were below 2 and even below 1 in some cases. So very accurate grayscale out of the box. So you could just use the warm setting. If you want, you can try our actual settings for the color temperature, but they're actually almost identical to the ones that were in the warm setting. That had 127, 88 and 64, and we ended up using 127, 88 and 66. So really, you may as well just stick with the out-of-the-box setting of warm, rather than bothering to use the custom control. And then under color control, the colors are actually pretty accurate, and the only adjustment we had to make was in the hue of yellow, which we moved slightly. Otherwise, most of the other colors were very accurate, very close to their target, particularly, as I said, from 75% on down. So just a little tweak on the hue of yellow. And then, what else have we got? Contrast. So in here, contrast mode off, dynamic contrast off. Brightness, this is the brightness control, which sets the black level basically of the television. Leave that as default setting at 50. Video contrast, so this is what most manufacturers would normally call contrast. And we set that to 88. That's the point at which it doesn't clip. Any higher than that starts to clip the whites, so 88 gives you a nice, basically the idea is to set the contrast as high as possible, as not to clip whites, and the brightness control as low as possible, so not to crush blacks, giving you a nice wide dynamic range. So 88 there. Light sensor off, and then gamma for our target of 2.4 for any nighttime setting. Using gamma of +1 gave us a measurement that was very close to 2.4. So again, very good there on the part of Philips. And then over here in sharpness, we've turned all these off. Philips does have a lot of processing features on their TVs, probably more than they really need. And whether you use or not is really down to personal preference, but personally, I find that most processing features on all TVs end up giving the image a processed and artificial look. So generally, if you're watching a reasonably high quality source, you don't need them, so generally turn them off. So ultra resolution off, noise reduction off, and MPEG artifact noise reduction off. Under motion, again, a lot of motion control features, motion handling and motion frame interpolation features on these TVs, which if you're watching anything film based, turn off. I mean, feel free to experiment with perfect natural motion and clear LCD when you're watching things like football, sports-based stuff, which is shot on video cameras. But if you're watching film-based content, we always recommend turning any of these settings off. Otherwise, you end up making film look like video, and you don't want that. Okay, that is the nighttime setting. So let's go back to picture style and across. And now we'll go to the daytime setting. As you can see, immediately it's going to get a bit brighter. And then go down to color. Again, as with nighttime setting, color you can set to 60. It needs a bit of a wider color gamut, which means that the lower saturation points are hitting their targets more precisely. Now we've got a much higher contrast backlight setting, 65 here, gives you a nice bright image for a room with a lot of ambient light. Depends on your room, of course. If you've got a room that's relatively dark even during the daytime, you might just want to stick with a nighttime setting, or maybe do a setting between the two. But if you have a room with a lot of windows, a lot of bright light, a lot of sunshine, then you want a higher setting. So this is for our particular room, but you might find you might need to adjust this slightly depending on your own personal environment. Sharpness, again, 0, and over to the advanced. And again, color temperature, you can use our custom settings, which are the same as they are for the nighttime setting, or you could just use the warm setting, which again, very accurate out of the box. And then under color control, here, there was just a small tweak to magenta, +2. And then back to contrast. And again, contrast mode off, dynamic contrast off, brightness still at 50, video contrast 88 still, light sensor off. And now the gamma is at -1. That's giving us a gamma of 2.2, which again is our target for a daytime setting. And then sharpness off, off, and off. And motion, again, off if you're watching any film-based content, but again, feel free to experiment if you're watching video-based content like sports. Okay, so those are our settings for a daytime and a nighttime setting. We're now going to switch the input and change to an HDR source, and we'll show you a setting for HDR. We're now sending an HDR signal, and when the TV receives an HDR signal, a little message appears in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen saying HDR signal. And if we go back into the settings menu, all settings, and then over to picture style, you'll see that there are a lot of different HDR options now available because the TV's gone into its HDR modes. We're going to use HDR movie. Now for that you can set color to 50. HDR contrast is now at 100. That's what it defaults to, but leave it at 100. Sharpness you can set to 0. In the advanced settings, under color, use the color temperature of warm. And then in contrast mode off, dynamic contrast off, brightness at 50, HDR video contrast also defaults to 100, light sensor off, and gamma at 0. And then sharpness, as before, turn those off. And for motion, as before with film-based content, again, leave those off. And there you go. Those are our settings for a day setting, a night setting, and an HDR setting. Thanks for watching.